everyone. So this week you guys are going to be working in Camera Raw. So I wanted to show you guys around a little bit and explain some stuff before you actually dive in. So first off, Camera Raw is all about working with raw photo files. What does this mean? Raw files are the original file that when a camera takes a photo, it creates this file. Now, a lot of cameras might automatically convert them to JPEG depending on the settings. And when I'm talking about a lot of cameras, I'm talking about DSLR cameras, mirrorless cameras, phone cameras. And there are some phones where you can shoot in RAW now. You have to go into your settings, into your camera or your phone, and make sure that it's set there. You can shoot in RAW. And the great thing about RAW is that you have all of the data that the camera captured in that file. What's different from that than a JPEG is that a camera takes the photo, it creates a raw file, but then it applies some automatic settings like contrast and vibrance. Kind of depends on the camera and the setting it's on and all kinds of technical stuff. But then it compresses it down to a JPEG file. JPEGs are great for sharing, but when you want to do really fine editing, you want to start with the raw file. You can do things like if the photo is really dark or there's really dark areas, you can actually bring the shadows up and you won't lose the quality in there. You can also do things like change the white balance, like the overall color settings, and it'll do a much better job on a raw file than it will on a JPEG. So, I go into all of this a lot more in my other Photoshop classes because those are Photoshop classes for photographers where we're focusing specifically on editing photos. Whereas in this class, we're focusing more on the graphic design aspect of Photoshop. So if you're interested in all of this and you get into this chapter and you're really into it, I'd say come take some of my other Photoshop classes and we'll talk more about it. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into Camera Raw so I can show you around. Now, another reason why I'm doing this video is because some things have changed since the book has been published. And the book was published not that long ago, but things change really fast when it comes to software nowadays. So, first off, I need to go ahead and open some raw files. So I'm going to go to Open. And let's see, I have some photos here, and you'll notice that instead of like JPEG or something out here, it says ARW. This is the raw file format for Sony. For Canon, it's CR2. For Nikon, it's NEF. So each different manufacturer of camera has their own what's called proprietary raw file. So these are all taken on my Sony mirrorless camera. I'm going to go ahead and click on this first one, then holding down Shift, I'm going to click on the last one, which is going to select all of these images, and I'm going to click Open. Now, because these are raw files, they're automatically going to open in Camera Raw in Photoshop. Sweet! So nothing special you have to do here, you just click and open. Alright, so now let's take a look. Now the big difference between what you're seeing here and what you're going to see in the book is that they're going to tell you to click along the top on some icons to get to the different areas. But it has recently changed. Now everything is in these little like tab type of panels, okay? I'll just call them panels. So when you're in the book and it tells you to click on the detail icon, really you need to click on this detail panel instead, and the same options should be there. Should, because like I said, things change quickly, updates happen all the time. I can make a video today and there'll be an update tomorrow. So if there's any problem at all, you can't find something, just shoot me an email and I'll take a look around and see what I can do to help. Okay, so I'm just gonna there's a lot you can do in here. This is a really, really powerful tool. So I'm just gonna stick to some of the basics. And this is gonna be things that you're probably kind of familiar with. Like I said, if you've ever edited photos on a phone, a lot of these things are on there. And actually, I kind of think they influenced each other when they started coming out because photo editing apps and Camera Raw came out around the same time. So anyways, let's take a look around. So up here we have some color, different color profiles we can play with depending on the type of photo that was taken. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on Adobe Color. We can play with the white balance, and all these white balance settings are going to be the exact same settings that I had in my camera. And the big difference here is if I brought in a JPEG file into here, you're not going to have all these settings because all of these settings are embedded in what's called the metadata, or the data of a photo. If this was a JPEG file, it would only give me, I think, a couple settings. But luckily, we have a bunch of different settings here that I could play with, or I can customize it. I can make it warmer, I can make it cooler, just like we did when we were playing with color before. Now the really cool thing when it comes to white balance in Camera Raw that I love is this tool here. It's a white balance tool. So if I take this, and the key is to click anywhere that is supposed to be neutral, as in white, black, or gray, it's going to do a pretty good job of figuring out my white balance, because I'm telling the software that this area shouldn't have any extra colors, and that it shouldn't have any extra yellows or blues or greens or magentas. It should just be gray. So let's see how it does. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. It's a little bit cool for my taste, but it was taken on a sunny day. So I'm actually going to, that's a good starting point, but then I'm going to take it up just a bit and add a little bit of that warmth back, because that's just the vibe I want. There's things like exposure, make things lighter and darker, contrast. So this is a really, quick way to do some fast edits. That doesn't mean that there isn't good things, you got to do some edits in Photoshop sometimes, especially if you want to do very specific things and add layer masks, stuff like that. There's no layer masks in Camera Raw, but if you need to do some quick edits, this is a great place to do it. Okay. You could take down, so your highlights are the lightest parts, and so if you're seeing on the poles there, that helps with that. If we have really dark areas, shadows, you can open those up a bit, but I'm actually liking them kind of low. All right. Yeah, so there's all kinds of great stuff. We have texture that kind of brings out, the texture, you can see it here. Yeah, this is still a good photo to work on. You could take your whites up, that's way too much. Or your blacks down, blacks up, things like that. And like I said, I'm not going to go super into this because this is all stuff that I cover in other classes. But you're going to find that this is a really great tool when you need to do some quick edits on your raw photos before you take it into Photoshop. And you're going to be playing, in this chapter, you're going to be playing with some of this stuff. You're going to be playing with detail, some sharpening. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in here too. Things like geometry. So if you have buildings that are leaning forward, you can definitely change it up. And let's say you need to tilt things backwards or forwards, stuff like that. You totally can. Let's see. Reset. There are some grain effects, so if you want to add that grain type of texture. Oh, this is such a big file, it's really hard to see, but it's there. Vignettes. So for optics, if you're using a lens that has a lot of distortion, like a fisheye lens, and you don't want that distortion, you can actually have this correct it. I have mine automatically corrected from my lens, but if I wanted to actually add some distortion, I could too. I can make it pop out a bit, could fix the vignetting. Yeah, so there's a ton of things you could do. And then I can even synchronize all of these. If I wanted to, apply this setting and apply it to everything, I can totally do that as well. Okay. So before I sync these settings, let me do something a little bit more dramatic so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So let's say I actually wanted to turn this black and white. Oh, well, I had them all selected. So that did them all. So let me go ahead and just select one, and let's go to black and white. And what's pretty cool here is that once I click on black and white, so if I don't have black and white clicked, I have like a color mixer. But once I click on black and white, that actually turns to a black and white mixer where I can change it up depending on the color. Now there's only two colors really in this image. There's like a blue, tealish, it's like a bluish color, and white. So there's not much I could do here. Well, let's do this one instead. Black and white. Then I can come here and let's take the reds. Okay, you can see how dramatic that becomes, right? So you can really start crafting these crazy black and white images in here. Let's see what I like. That's looking good. Make those darker. All right. Make that darker. All right. And let's see, this is a really nice photo already. I add a little bit of contrast, take my exposure up just a bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it, how it's looking already. All right, let's just leave it there. Actually, let's pump up the clarity, make it crazy. The texture, bam. All right, so now let's say I wanted to apply this to the other photos. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Command and click and select all of these photos. And then I'm going to right click and go to Sync Settings. It's going to give me the option to sync what I want to sync. Do I want to sync everything? Sure, let's just sync everything. Hit OK, and now you can see that these are all done. Now these settings might not be the best for this particular, for like this image right here, like this is not the best black and white setting for it. But you know, if you had a bunch of photos that were all pretty similar and you wanted the same look on all of them, you can quickly apply all these different settings, which is awesome. Makes things a whole lot easier. So actually, let's take this black and white off real quick. And you can see that all the other settings are still there. Yeah, so I can totally come back in here and play with this. And you know, if I didn't like this, I could just double click. It won't work no more like that. There we go. Double click on this one. There we go. It used to be you double click on the actual name. I guess they just changed it. So now it's double click on the little arrow. Nope, to reset the setting. All right, pretty interesting. So yeah, there's gonna be some things like that that kind of change up probably when you're going through the chapter. Like I said, it's a pretty intuitive part of Photoshop, so try your best. If you really get stuck, just send me an email and I will try to help you out with it. Or not try, I totally will. And yeah, so welcome to Camera Raw, a whole new part of Photoshop. And one more thing to know that's kind of important is if you've ever worked with Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom is it's basically like a way to organize your photos, but there's also features in there, including editing. The editing feature is the exact same thing, basically, as Camera Raw. It's the same, what we call engine. The same software is working behind the scenes for Camera Raw and for editing in Lightroom. So learning this is actually going to give you a leg up if you decide to start learning Lightroom as well. Alright guys, so I hope that this was helpful. This quick review over Adobe Camera Raw. You're going to be doing a whole chapter on this, so you're going to get even more acquainted with it. And yeah, have fun editing.